What's up everybody, Demon back, and welcome to my Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 5, episode breakdown. This one is going to be doing a breakdown for the episode called Go-Getters. I'm coming back to YouTube, so I kind of took a break. I've been only posting pre-recorded content or content that I didn't really have to be in because, well, I've kind of been having a crappy week. So I hope all of you guys had a good week. I hope all of you had, for those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, had a happy Thanksgiving. Other than that, I'm back. I'm doing modern, current YouTube, so from now until I need more pre-recorded stuff, it's gonna be new. So yes, there will be news updates for Shin Gojira and Kong Skull Island coming out soon. Sorry I didn't do any of that this week. I just, like I said, I have not really been in any sort of place to do those kind of videos. So, without further ado, let's get into the episode breakdown. The episode starts out with some scenes that are very reminiscent to things we've already seen before, which is really cool. I mean, the first shot of the episode is Maggie opening her eyes, which is very similar to the way Beth opened her eyes back in Slab Town. Also, Maggie stares up at some purple flowers which are alive and blooming, which is in direct contrast to when Rick stared up at some dead flowers that Shane brought him. From here, we find out that Maggie is at Hilltop Colony, which means Sasha did actually get her there safely, and the baby is healthy, which is good news. Maggie goes outside and visits Glenn's grave, where she actually places down Glenn's pocket watch, which was given to him by Herschel on Glenn's grave. This was given to Maggie by Sasha, who found it in Glenn's pocket. And then we have the funny line, all Abraham had was a cigar, because, well, Abraham was not a sentimental person. Jesus comes over and explains to them that green represents release. We see that featured at the end of the episode as well. Now Gregory walks over, showing everyone why he's a hateable character, when he yells at Maggie and Sasha immediately right off the bat. Mostly Maggie, because he doesn't even know that Sasha is not one of the people from the hilltop. Also, throughout this whole sequence, he's getting everyone's name wrong because he just doesn't care about his own people. The last thing he tells Jesus is that if Maggie and Sasha leave, they still have plausible deniability. But as we see later in the episode, the Saviors already clearly know that the Hilltop is involved in some way, shape, or form with the Alexandria assassination of the Savior hideout. Now, another little cool thing about this sequence with Gregory is we get a direct contrast to Glenn's line earlier in Season 1 when Glenn told Daryl, "We don't burn them, we bury them," when he was talking about the dead. Now we have Gregory saying, "We don't bury our dead, we burn them." So that's a really cool parallel here, and the fact that he is referring to Glenn's body that's what makes it really great. So from here, we see just Dart's missing the dartboard, which just shows that Carl is still trying to adjust to his missing eye. Enid hops the fence. Rick and Aaron actually run out. They head out on a run. We get a parallel scene here with later in the episode when Rick and Michonne share a goodbye kiss to when Carl and Enid share a kiss. We'll get back to that later. So Sasha asks Jesus, "What do you want this place to be?" because she's mostly questioning him about, well, you don't want Gregory in charge. We don't want Gregory in charge. You're clearly a much more competent leader. What do you want this place to be? Focusing the question on him. Some cool things about this is the line, "What do you want this place to be?" being a most likely reference to Deanna back last season in Season 6, asking Michonne, "What do you want for you?" Then we also have the return of Abraham's necklace that Sasha made him. Really cool here because that necklace represented when Abraham moved from from Rosita to Sasha because Rosita made it. And now Sasha's getting it, and it is the symbol of when Abraham picked her, so now she has the symbol of that. From here, we have Maggie and Jesus and Sasha kind of talking to each other. They're in Maggie and Sasha's temporary home. Then we find out that Jesus says, "We don't keep anything to remember our dead. The idea is to keep going on." Maggie asks, "What do you have to remember them by?" And Jesus says, us. This is a really cool reference to Glenn's speech last season. The people you love, they're still a part of you even after they're gone. It's super cool to see that return, because that whole idea return, because if that was Glenn bringing Enid back from a bad place, now we have Jesus bringing Maggie back from a bad place by using Glenn's words, even though he never heard Glenn say it. Now we have a funny scene where Enid turns around and sees this walker get plowed over by a car. It is only funny because it was Carl driving the car, and the only other time we've seen someone wreck a car for no reason is Lori, Carl's mom, who decided to hit the one walker in the middle of the road and then drive into a ditch instead of keep going forward. Now Maggie and everyone in the hilltop is woken up by some sort of strange music playing outside the gate. They look outside. There's the guards of the hilltop wall are hung from the wall, if you see that in the background. Then there's fires set throughout the hilltop, and walkers are let in. Maggie stands up on top of an RV barking orders at everyone, setting up her leadership later in the series. Meanwhile, Jesus shows off really how awesome he is by doing some sweet karate moves. I mean, he climbs down a pillar, he jumps off buildings, he has that really great silhouette of him kicking a zombie in front of a fire. Jesus is really, really awesome. He's a great character. Meanwhile, Sasha is trying to get into the car that is blaring music. Gregory is watching because he is not one to put himself in danger for others, because he's that kind of selfish person. And Maggie actually winds up driving over the car with a tractor. Carl and Enid are still moving their way to Hilltop. They find some roller skates, and they skate off together. Some parallel images here with Enid and Carl holding hands to a comic book scene when Carl and Sophia held hands. Now Gregory arrives at Hilltop. He kind of charges in, showing everyone who's boss. He gets there and tells Gregory they need to talk. Then he explains to Gregory that the people that Gregory dealt with, the saviors that he dealt with, are now dead, and kind of questioned him about, like, hey, do you know what this was going on here? Do you know what this was about? And Gregory kind of blows him off, says, I didn't know that. Well, I'd love to have you as our new Negan, pretty much. And Gregory Gregory tells him, it's okay, the people that killed the people that you were working with, they're real go-getters. So that's the episode title being brought in, referring to the Alexandrians. This is the line, I'm your Negan, said by Simon, which is really sweet. Then he asks him, is there anything I should be aware of? Do you want to tell me? Is there any secrets you should be telling me? And of course, Gregory attempts to give up Sasha and Maggie, who he thought were hiding in a closet in the hallway. Instead, he just winds up bumping into his alcohol chest and having to give it all up to Negan. Now we get another funny line from Simon explaining, alright, I'm going to take the credit for this one. I really want the headline on this, as he says. Then he gets Gregory to kneel for him in front of everyone. And Gregory does, because Gregory understands, I can't fight this guy. I'm a coward. And furthermore than that, my people will lose and die. Meanwhile, Rick was kind of the opposite and fights back against Negan, even though he knows he's going to lose. And although he is mostly the servant to Negan as of now, we all know that won't last forever. Here, when Carl and Enid arrive at Hilltop, we get a really weird focus on Carl's big old knife. I'm assuming that is because they're going to remix a comic book moment we're going to talk about here in a second. Instead of Carl shooting Abraham's machine gun, he's going to wind up stabbing the saviors with his own knife. Now, like I said, we would get back to it with Carl and Enid kissing. This is more comic book parallels to Enid, or to Sophia and Carl, because Enid's role is really shifting into the role of Sophia from the Walking Dead comic series, as we'll see here in a couple minutes. Now Gregory yells at Jesus and says you should have put them in the hallway closet, and Maggie and Sasha kind of stand up to him. Jesus says we're all going to be one big dysfunctional family, and Gregory says, alright, I'll be the one who sees us through it. And then he tells Maggie saviors can be quite reasonable, which is him throwing it in her face that two of her friends and her husband just died. And she does not take it. She punches him right in the face. And right here it's revealed that Gregory stole Glenn's watch. She takes it back. He says it's a fine watch. She says, "This is our home now. You'll learn to call me my name. Not Marcia, not dear, not honey. Maggie, Maggie Rhee." Really, really sweet, because unlike in the comic series, I don't ever remember that line in the comic series. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think she ever changes her name from Maggie Green. So it's really sweet to see that she changed her name to Maggie Rhee in honor of Glenn. Also, I read somewhere online that this is the first time in the TV series that we've heard Glenn's last name. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but the more I think about it, the more I can't remember them ever saying Glenn Rhee. Once again, correct me if I'm wrong here. That's just what I read online. Now we have another cool scene of Jesus pretty much alluding to the fact that, yeah, someday Maggie's going to be the leader of this place, because he says, "I could not imagine anyone else in Gregory's place. I can now." He's looking right at Maggie, and Sasha gives him a little smile, because both of them see the leadership potential in Maggie. Rick saw that same potential, Deanna saw that same potential, and now Hilltop is starting to see that potential. As we all know in the comic series, Maggie does wind up taking the role from Gregory. She becomes leader of Hilltop and winds up, spoiler alert, executing Gregory someday in the future because he tries to assassinate her. At the end of the episode here, everything comes full circle. We get green balloons on top of the grave for someone. Enid thought that she was putting the balloons on Glenn's grave. Turns out Sasha says that it was Abraham's grave. Maggie says, "I didn't have the heart to tell you." Glenn would have. He was a bad liar. Sasha says there's nothing wrong with balloons. Now we're getting the final setup for Enid becoming comic book Sophia, because now Enid and Maggie have basically become this mother-daughter bond with each other, where it's very clear that Maggie is going to, take care of Enid, look after her for the rest of her life, and they're going to have this kind of relationship that they have in the comic with Maggie and Sophia. Other things that are really cool here is that we have Glenn would've, he's a bad liar, referencing Glenn telling Maggie, "I suck at lying, I can't even play poker, it's too much like lying." A really funny line back from Season 2. Also, the green balloons, referencing Glenn's green balloons from Heads Up last season. Once again, I told you at the start of the episode, everything comes full circle. Green being the color of release, now they're on the graves in the form of the balloons. Just once again symbolizing release. The balloons in this scene symbolize letting the death go and moving on with their lives. The episode wraps up here in a really cool way, where Maggie and Enid and Sasha are sitting there. They have a little three-person praying circle. Then Sasha goes out and starts sharpening her knife while she has Abraham's cigar from his pocket in her mouth. Jesus hops into the back of a moving truck from the Saviors. It turns out to be the truck going to the quote-unquote Negan truck. Because that is the truck that the alcohol was going in, was the truck to Negan, and that just happens to be the one that Jesus hops in. So now he is on his way to the sanctuary. He pours out the alcohol, looks up, and sees Carl sitting there staring back at him. He gives him a little smile, which is something I find cool. I find it cool that Jesus wasn't like, "Hey, you need to get out of here," or at least at this point he's not like, "You gotta go." He's like more interested, more curious about, why is this kid in this car? As we all know in the comic series, Jesus is actually taken to the sanctuary, and then he hops out of the car, where Carl's storyline comes into play with the coolest Carl moment ever, where he guns down a whole bunch of saviors. I already said I think they're going to remix this. I think Carl is going to stab a whole bunch of them with his little knife, or I guess it's a big knife, but not a gun. Not Abraham's big, huge machine gun, but it'll still be a cool moment. Overall, this was a really good episode. I want to give it an 8 out of 10. It was a little bit slow at points, but once again, just like episode 2 this season, the slowness didn't bother me at all. I thought it was good to have a slow episode. I liked it. Good character development and lots of great setup. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man out.